perhaps one of the reasons some people avoid this conclusion, which may be a depressing conclusion about humans, is because the picture of human nature that it paints is rather ugly, or could be ugly, and that I legitimately think humans, especially men, I mean, harder to say with women, it gets more complicated, but they actually like mortal lethal conflict or something resembling mortal lethal conflict, and the ever-present possibility of real violence and the ultimate stakes, as it were. Those are important features of the male social brain
Yeah.
and the male desire for combat, conflict, even when death is the like the ultimate peril, right? What do you think about that? And I'll just note that there's an excellent movie that illustrates this, Hurt Locker, in which the soldier, he's like addicted to diffusing bombs, and I think addiction, like literally the quote at the beginning of the movie is about being addicted to war. And he comes home toward the end, and they show one of the great shots in cinema, I think, where he's in the cereal aisle, and it's just like this sprawling aisle of, thousands of cereals, and he just is utterly dejected, like utterly empty, like these, who cares if I get Lucky Charms or, Raisin Bran? What does it matter? This decision is utterly pointless. And then he goes back to war again.
It
And
goes
I,
back
I,
to the
I
Middle
think,
East.
yes, exactly. And I think that illustrate like that is an important feature of male psychology that we don't like to reckon with or face honestly.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. Uh, was it Orwell who described like team sports as the closest thing to warfare in modern society? He said it in a much pithier way, obviously.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
but I yeah,
obviously team sports for the most part don't carry the risk of death, so the stakes aren't nearly as high as conventional coalitional combat. Uh, but it does they do provide that same kind of coalitional dynamic in which a group of men competes with another group of men over some resource or or
right.
or over reputation, let's say.
Yeah, it's the Stanley Cup. It's a sort of invented resource, as it were, but it's also prestige. And two things are striking about sports. One, when you listen to people who play sports, or even people who announce sports, for example, describe it, it's rather martial and warlike. We're going to war out there. Give it everything you've got. And also, when players retire, one thing that I find, fascinating and seems to confirm this hypothesis is that they will talk about how they've never experienced the kind of camaraderie they had
Mm.
on their team, and that the greatest memories they have were, after a win on the airplane flying
Yeah,
home. And that's because it really creates this sense of male bonding and coalitional value where everybody is working toward the same goal in a way that you just can't replicate in like bourgeois America or Britain or whatever, the
yeah, yeah,
West. Perhaps paintball is an attempt to do this, right?
yeah. Well, that gentleman who wrote a very interesting book about what it's like to come home after being at war, Sebastian Junger,
Younger, yeah.
interviewed many American war vets. I think some who are thriving, many who are not. I concluded that the thing that humans, or perhaps specifically men, want is to feel necessary. They need to feel that other people depend on them.
Yes.
The point that we've made a number of times in this conversation. And when you come back from war to a society in which the attributes that confer status and confer value are very different from what they are on the battlefield, it can be very jarring.
And furthermore, like your platoon's need for you is much more direct and immediate than even your family's need for you in some sense, because if you fail your platoon, they might all die, so they respect you and you respect them in a way. Like if you die in your family in the era of the welfare state, yes, of course your wife will grieve, or I hope your wife will grieve. Maybe she'll secretly celebrate. But yes, your family will grieve, but the painful truth is you're eminently replaceable.
Yeah, yeah,
So yes, and actually Junger had this interesting thing. I think it's in that book. It might have been in a different one where he talked about how when you ask people like their most important memories or even their most fond memories, sometimes or even often they'll say some like catastrophe that brought people together, even more so than a tropical vacation or their wedding. Like when
yeah.
that hurricane struck and we were all working together against these hostile forces of nature, that's when I felt most alive in the most meaningful moment of my life.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting and noteworthy that according to uh, the latest review that I saw, suicide rates tend to decline during wars. You would think perhaps that war would cause so much suffering among the
Right.
survivors that people would be so heartbroken over the deaths of their friends and relatives and the destruction of the physical environment that they were familiar with, that they would be more inclined to kill themselves. But in fact, they apparently become much less inclined to do so. That's not to
Yeah.
say
And
we
that,
need more war. I mean,
right, right.
war does
Yeah.
cause objective harm, especially
Yes.
modern, incredibly destructive wars involving bombs and missiles and artillery. Um, but we do seem to need some kind of struggle, which is the main point that we've been trying to get across during this entire discussion.